Surviving 100 days in ancient Rome with 3 tasks. Kill Vulcan, the god of the armories and volcanoes. Defeat the best gladiator in Rome in the sands of the Colosseum. And defeat Orcus, the god of the underworld. Can I survive 100 days in ancient Rome while building my own empire? Let's find out. If this video gets 20,000 likes, I'll do a part 2. Enjoy. As I spawned into a brand new world, I was immediately chased by 2 legionnaires. I was now an outcast. I ran and ran until I arrived at a random peasant's house. I began tearing down his walls to borrow some of his wood, and then I entered his home to see if I had anything he could lend me for a little while. I then left it in perfect condition, with no faults at all, and moved on. Right next to his house I found a small chicken coop. Not sure whose it was, so I didn't mind helping myself. I then began exploring the terrain and getting as far as I could from the capital. I knew now, as a banished citizen of Rome, I would be hated by my enemies for having killed them when I was a Roman officer, and I'd be hated by Rome. So, my only chance was to survive by going to the plains and escaping both of these worlds. But I knew, eventually, I'd have to come back and reclaim what they took from me. I then found a large tower that had very few guards. I knew if I was able to take out the guards, I could loot what was inside, and it would give me a really good head start. However, these guards were armed to the teeth, so I was very careful. I slowly made my way up the stairs, killing everybody who was in my path. For now, everybody was my enemy, nobody was my ally, except for myself. I then collected all of the weapons and armor drops that were dropped by the guards inside, for when I forged my own army, I would need all the weaponry I could get. The next day I saw a colosseum-like structure, and when I approached, I was immediately chased out by a bunch of gladiators. This would be something I'd have to come back for. I knew if I wanted to gain the support of Rome and take down the evil dictators that had banished me, I would need to win the people. And the way you win the people is on the sands of the Colosseum. I knew one day I'd be fighting here, but for now, I would continue my journey. Whilst exploring that day, I saw a Roman-like structure, almost a ruin, inside containing what looked to be a god. I had no chance of facing him now though, but I would mark this location for later, because destroying a god would bring me enough fame that before the Roman people they would fear me. And with fear comes control. I then found a nice even place, and I decided this would be my new home. It was very flat and very green. From there I went down to the mines and I began collecting some of my beginning resources. I then continued delving deeper and deeper into the caves. I found some fire creatures. Most likely this invasion was due to Orcus, the Roman god of the underworld. I used a shield to block their fiery projectiles and slowly destroyed them all. I then looted the chests they were guarding. Orcus was planning something, but I didn't know what yet. I then continued mining, making sure to gather all the iron and precious resources I could to outfit my armies. If I was going to take on the giant legions that were Rome, I was going to need an army of immense magnitude. I made my way back up to the surface, and I placed my first structure, a town hall. I wanted to build a Roman-themed city inside of this new area, but to do that, I wanted to use an older sandstone theme. So, my town hall would be constructed using sandstone. However, I had to wait for some peasants to come and occupy the land and call me their new lord. So, for now I'd adventure the surrounding terrain and see what was around. I found a small camp, and when I approached it, I was immediately attacked. I tried to take on the guards, but I was too ill-equipped. I headed back to the main center, and I designed myself some iron armor. This iron armor would give me enough protection, hopefully, to take on those guards. So I ventured back, and the battle began. Eventually, though, I was able to take them all out, and only a few remained inside of the structure itself. I then ventured closer, and slowly began to take out the remaining guards, and then headed into the structure to loot it. After bringing the loot home, I decided I would begin working on a builder's hut. This would enable me to expand my kingdom once the peasants arrived. I then began to work on my own quarters. It was essential that I had a house of my own to store all the items that I'd be gathering, for if I was going to create a giant army, I was going to need to be able to store all the resources and all of the armor that I would need for the future. So I began work on a custom style house using the dark oak from the forest nearby and cobblestone from the mines. Although it was a simple design, the contrast I thought looked cool. I also can't build for anything. I then ventured down to the stream and I gathered some sand. I would smelt down the sand into glass, and this would enable me to have some windows. I knew Rome was going to be sending out spies for me, so the easier I could see them coming, the better. I then completed the house, put down some chests, and began transferring all my items from outside into the new home. I then went down into the mines and I gathered some lava. We had some unfinished business with the barracks we had attacked at the beginning. I then used the lava to boil the soldiers inside alive. They had declared war on me, and for that, I would give them no mercy. I then claimed the flag inside of the barracks, which then turned the barracks over to me, and from there, I looted the chests inside, gathering all the resources. This was perfect because it would give me enough food to begin creating a small fighting force. I then prepared myself and I ventured to the mountains, where the giants of old now resided. I knew I would have to destroy them if I wanted to collect the first of the 7 fabled swords. These swords, once collected, would give me the power I would need to turn the tides back against Rome. But these giants were no pushovers. Again and again he brought me down to half a heart, but I pushed through and I used the trees to my advantage, and eventually I brought him down. When I went into his cave, sure enough, there was a chest there, and inside, the first of 7 of the fabled swords of old. I spent the next days adventuring, looking for the god Vulcan, the god of the blacksmiths and volcanoes of ancient Rome. Killing him would assert my place inside of this world and would put me on the radar. And although I wanted to be a little bit low-key at this point, I knew he was an essential step towards my ascension of becoming a god myself. However, when I found where he was, I knew I couldn't attack him in broad daylight, as there was many villas beside him with Roman soldiers. So I waited until nighttime, and then I plunged into the sea. As I got closer and closer, I began working on my game plan. And when I got to his tower, I made my way up the ladder, and the assault began. We ended up going back to the ground as my sword shoots him back like 20 blocks every time I hit him. This fabled sword was stronger than I thought. Actually, after a few close calls, I took him down as morning dawned. This was the first of many gods to be slain by my hand. When I went down to collect his loot, I noticed a strange tablet, and when I picked it up, it was called a rune. I knew exactly what this was, and I had to get back to my base as quickly as possible. Before heading home, I went back to his original perch, and I looted the chests, and then I ventured on home. And when I returned home, I ventured down into the mines, as if I wanted to read the rune, I was going to need some redstone. So I delved deeper and deeper, but whilst I was down there, I saw a creature. I had never seen this type of creature before. When I looked back up again, it was gone. I went around the corner to see if I could find it, but nothing was there. And as I returned back, it was straight in front of me, and I bolted. And then I realized, wait a second, I need to kill this thing. So I ventured right back, and it was gone. I had no idea who sent it, but I knew I just had to continue doing what I was doing, and I'd figure it out later. I then crafted the rune reader with the redstone I'd acquired, and I read the rune. I could only imagine that it was an ancient armor piece, as in the center, there were diamond leggings required to craft it. But there was a lot of magical and rare items that would be required to craft this, so for now, I would leave it be. From there, I decided to expand my village a little bit. I built 2 builders' huts, and my first citizen's hut. This would enable me to have a bigger population, while also working on a lot of building. I then began the creation of the first guards that would guard my camp. I placed them down and began gearing them up, but while I was doing that, night fell upon us and the undead came to claim our lives. But thankfully we were able to fend them off and we survived the night. I then began outfitting my guards with even more armor, but as I placed them down they began to sprint away, so I followed them.
It turns out they really wanted to meet Ellie, one of my builders. I then placed some guards outside of my house, and placed some patrols all around the town. I knew if Rome was going to send spies to kill me, I had to be ready. So I made sure there were plenty of guards, especially around the places that I went the most. And then, I delved back into the mines to collect some cobblestone. I then decided it'd be a cool idea to put a roof on my house, as apparently people do that nowadays. So I gathered some cobblestone, made it into slabs, and began creating a roof over my house. The pools of water were getting a little bit much inside. However, the clock was ticking, and I knew soon it would be time to adventure back out and begin taking on some of the city-states that Rome engulfed inside of its empire. I then finished the roof, got down and took a look at it, and it was a good reminder to myself of why I was a warrior, not a builder. From there, I harvested some of the surrounding sugarcane and did a little bit of base maintenance. I then ventured out looking for some elephants. If I was going to construct an army that could take on the legions of Rome, I was going to need powerhouses of my own, and that was going to be in the form of these giant creatures. To tame them, I would use the sugar from the sugarcane, as I seemed to like these delectable treats. However, I could only tame the babies, so after I found a herd, I looked for the young ones, and I tamed them with my sugarcane. I named one Rudolph, and one Big Bertha. Whilst adventuring, I was attacked by a small tribe. I didn't want anything to do with them, but they knew I used to be a Roman soldier by the way I marched. So, they thought I was their enemy. I was barely able to make my escape. To craft the mammoth saddles for these elephants, I was going to need boar hide. It's quite ironic that such small creatures can create such massive saddles, but I digress. From there, I ventured out to kill the boars and take their hide. Whilst in the forest, I was attacked by a brown bear, and barely slayed him before he took me out. This world was full of many dangers. If it wasn't the enemies of Rome, or Rome itself hunting me, it was nature. Whilst on my way back to the elephants, I saw these two giant tower-like structures. I thought they were really cool. I then traveled home, and with the new hide that I had, crafted elephant saddles. I headed back to where I had tamed them, and sure enough, Rudolph and Big Bertha were fully grown up now. I put the saddles on them, and, after some big braining, figured out a way to ride them. It would take a while to get them back to the base, but they'd be well worth it. Once I could start breeding them and have my own elephant army, I could use them to trample down troops, run through walls, or other siege machine-like objects. When I got both elephants home, I crafted iron tusks. I didn't know how these worked, but when mounted on the front of an elephant, they work as siege machines. I tried to see if they would take out troops, but apparently they did not. They just destroyed blocks. This would still be useful though, because they protected me from ground troops, and they could help break down walls. I also knew that when approaching the final legions to take down Rome, they would quiver in fear as my elephants shook the ground beneath them. While setting up some of my settlers and working on a building, I was attacked by a spy. His only mission was to kill me. His armor gave him away. He was definitely a Roman soldier. I quickly backed up, and my men took over. But they had to keep up with him, and I was almost dead. So I ran around in circles whilst my men took him down. And eventually, after a final duel, he fell to the blade. This act of espionage would not go unpunished. I began gathering some resources. I collected some sand from the stream below, and I crafted some TNT and a pressure plate. For I had an idea. Before venturing back out though, I attempted to breed Rudolph and Big Bertha. I used my sugar lumps, but apparently they didn't want those. So for now, I'd have to figure out another way to get more elephants. As I gazed upon the starry night, I could only think to myself, soon this world will be mine. It was time to extract my vengeance. If I was going to infiltrate a Roman household to assassinate Marcus Antonius, the Roman general who sent the spy to kill me, I would need to blend in. I began collecting supplies needed to craft legionnaire armor. Whilst looking around, I found a small village that had red wool that I needed. I borrowed some of it, but of course repaired the damages. And there, it was as good as new. As nightfall came, I headed out to seek my fate. As I ventured closer and closer, I decided to take the mountain tops so I could be in secret as running right through the plains of Rome would be a grand mistake. I thought to myself, if I was going to create an army and bring it over to Rome, the mountains might be the best way to do it. However, I was scared the elephants may not be able to traverse it. And then I arrived at his house. I had to be sneaky, because if some of the guards recognized me, it would be all over. And as I walked through, I saw many upon many legionnaires with centurions. I tried to blend in as best I could, and I slowly made my way to Marcus Antonius's room. And inside, I planted a trap. I placed the TNT beneath the floor and the pressure plate atop it, so when Marcus walked in, he would trigger the TNT and he'd be blown up. I then went to the corner and I waited. As soon as I heard the explosion, I made my way out and ran for my life. When I arrived home, I immediately took off my legionnaire armor and put it on an armor stand, hopefully never to wear it again. My days in Rome were gone, and I would never wear their uniform again unless espionage was the only reason. I then ventured back down into the mines to begin gathering some more resources. I wanted to begin taking down small empires, but to do so, I was going to need more weapons and armor for my men. Whilst in the mines, I found some rare chests, and inside, some pretty good loot. I found a rare bow that I had never seen before. This would definitely help, as I could be a support archer now for my men. I continued mining for the next bit, finding a bunch of ancient chests that were buried beneath the surface, and collecting all the resources that I could get my hands on. I found what was called a potion of luck. I was very confused what it was, so I decided to drink it and see what it did. I couldn't really figure it out. I didn't know if it gave me more fortune or more experience, but I felt very lucky. I then began smelting down all the ores I had gathered. However, I forgot one key thing. I knew I was going to need to head to the Nether soon and confront Orcus, the god of the underworld. So I ventured back down into the mines and I gathered some obsidian. I made myself a portal, and when I went back into my house to gather some resources, I was attacked by a demon-like creature. Orcus knew I was coming and he was trying to stop me. There was something in the depths of the underworld that Orcus didn't want me to see, so I would see it. I then ventured into the underworld, and upon entering, I could hear the screams of the dead. This place was not somewhere I wanted to stay for long, but I needed to find the Tower of Orcus if I wanted to find the next fabled sword, the second of the 7. And then I found it, the Tower of Orcus, guarded by demons, and atop, who knows, maybe even the god himself. I gathered some netherrack, and I began my climb up to what could only be either my doom or my retribution. When I got up there was an ungodly-like figure that began attacking me. The fire damage was going to bring me to my knees, but thankfully, I had a fire-resistant potion that I had found inside of the mines, and although it only granted me 3 minutes of resistance, it would hopefully be enough. And, after a long drawn-out battle, the creature fell to my blade. Orcus did not want me to get this fabled sword, as he had sent one of his strongest minions to stop me from getting it. But, soon, the blade would be felt in Orcus's belly himself. I then went inside the structure and I found the chest, and inside, the second of 7 of the fabled swords of old. When I returned home, one of the first buildings I began constructing was a barracks. I knew I'd begin attracting barbarians soon, and if I wanted to protect my settlers, I would need more of an army stationed at home. I decided to take a quick ride on Big Bertha, and then I began to realize, if I was going to construct an army using elephants, I was going to need a place to hold them all. So now it was time to build a pen for all the elephants, and soon bring even more in and begin my assault on ancient Rome. I then began collecting the supplies I would need to build the structure that would house my elephants. I wanted to go with a 3-type contrast: dark oak wood, palm trees, and cobblestone.
I didn't exactly have a design in mind. I figured I would kind of go with the flow and figure out what happened. What ended up happening was, well, let's just say interesting. I thought the build looked okay and gave the elephants a nice view of the outside with these little slits that we allowed inside using slabs. However, I think it probably could have been better. I also didn't make a gate, so I put slabs there. Looked quite pog. I then moved the elephants into their new home, and although I can't speak elephant, I can definitely say they liked the new place a lot. When I got back into town, I noticed that my barracks was complete. This meant that my city would be safe if I left it again for another adventure. It was now time, or almost time, to seek the next adventure inside of ancient Rome. I knew if I was going to begin taking on some of the small empires and villas nearby, I was going to need an army of my own. So I began constructing more legionnaires and equipping them with armor, weapons, and shields. I posted a few more around the base, just in case of another spy or an attack. As my population was growing, I knew I was going to need more food to sustain everybody, so I began work on a small wheat farm. I thought it was kind of a cool design, rather than going with this plot of land, to just put water buckets everywhere, and then construct a farm around it. I thought it looked more natural. I decided I wanted to go and steal a Roman ship. Not exactly sure why. Probably a horrible idea. However, it seemed like the next move. So I ventured out, and I snuck my way into a Roman shipyard. The guards caught wind of the plot, but I was able to block most of them off. I killed the ones who remained on the ship, and lit the bridge afire. And then, I sailed out. I wanted to begin pirating so I could collect even more resources for my army and become an even bigger threat to Rome. I saw this blue lank ship in the distance and I decided I would go and investigate to see what it was. However, when I got inside, I was being struck by invisible forces. I reloaded my game because I thought that maybe it was a glitch. But oh no, this was a ghost pirate ship. The only way I could destroy them was by swinging randomly. I could see the death markers, and from there, I could slightly deduce where they were. It was a very slow and tedious process, and they kept sneaking up on me and trying to kill me. But eventually, I was able to take them out. As I made my way to the main deck, I found the captain's quarters. Although apparently as a ghost, he was too fat to fit through the door, so I was able to attack him from the other side. What a guy. From there, I looted all the items in the chests. This amount of diamonds would be epic. I also stole the cannon on the front of their ship because it looked cool. I then made my way back to my ship, and I saw in the distance a dockyard. So, I got in a smaller ship, and I began rowing towards it. When I came ashore, I saw a temple in the distance. I wanted to use some of their wood to craft some more soldiers, and to craft a piece of armor for myself. But all of the wood was protected by the Empire. I also saw an above-ground ocean monument. I had never seen this before, ever. I had to go and investigate it before I left. I visited some of the locals and I borrowed their crafting bench to make my armor piece. All the blocks in the land were protected. If I wanted them, I would need to declare war in the entire shipyard. And that probably wasn't the greatest of ideas. I was able to take some potatoes though. I made my way to the ocean monument, and I was immediately attacked by an ungodly amount of creatures. Neptune must have known I was here, for he sent every single fish-like creature to kill me. I barely escaped with my life. I found a small outpost on an island, and I attacked the guards. After taking them out, I found barely any loot, and, out of spite, I decided to take down a small ship nearby and sail away with it. There were many guards inside and I had to be cautious. The battle was fierce and I almost died. But in the end, I took the ship and I tried to sail it away. However, it wasn't a very good ship and I was forced to take my Roman ship back with me. I then returned home to find that my empire was expanding, my citizens were happy, and now, more than ever, it was time to progress. After gathering some resources, I decided I wanted to start progressing my colony. So I placed down a restaurant and I placed down a mine. The mine would enable me to passively gain resources, and the restaurant would feed my ever-growing population.
I decided I wanted to build an enchant area, as if I was going to take on the sands of the Colosseum soon, and the most epic gladiator within, I was going to need some good gear. However, I needed leather to craft books, and while scouting around, I found a small foraging base. I knew there was going to be a lot of leather inside, but I knew the guards would not just let me take it. And they attacked. I quickly retreated, went back home, got my own guards, and ventured back, and the battle began. It was fierce as my men clashed against theirs, but in the end, not only did I win, but I gained all of their armor and tools as well. This would help me expand my army, and I could craft an enchant area now. I continued crafting more and more of an army, and I remembered I had some loot chests, so I decided to open them. Inside of one, there was a knight's chest plate. This was an incredibly rare chest plate that would aid me in my travels of the future. I then began work on my new enchant area. I wanted it to be under the ground but still attached to the house, as I didn't want to have to walk too far for it. So I made a spiral staircase down into the earth, and I used a compilation of dark oak and dark oak wood logs to make the general perimeter. I then used a bunch of bookshelves, and voila, we had an enchanting area. I enchanted all of my gear, and now I knew it was time. There was no more playing around. While searching for the Colosseum, I found this rare tree ent. I tried to attack it as any pog champ would, however, it was beyond any mortal weapons. Well, rest easy, old lad. I then found a small castle in the distance, and I decided I would wage war upon its gates to collect all the resources inside. I placed down a few troops, and began the attack. I then broke down the main gates, and all heck broke loose. Men began pouring out of everywhere on both sides, and swords and shields clashed. I then picked a small squad, and we began venturing into buildings as we needed to find the main flag that held this empire together. Once I claimed it, the empire would fall under my rule. We continued to battle building by building until every soldier had fallen. I found some rare loot cases, and I opened them to find some ancient swords and tools inside. The Romans had been collecting these for years. I collected all my loot in the middle, and began making trips back and forth from the castle to my empire, bringing home armor, tools, and weapons to outfit an army of my own. I then continued placing even more troops. I knew if I was going to take on the Roman Empire, I was going to need as large of an army as I could get, and every opportunity I gained more resources was an opportunity to create an even bigger army. But the next step was the Colosseum, for that would win the hearts of the people. Before heading out to hunt for the Colosseum, I gathered some food, and then I left on my journey. I found a rather large village inside of a forest biome, but when I entered, I was attacked by a lot of soldiers, and I decided I would venture on. I wasn't after this village, I was after the Colosseum of Rome. While searching for the Colosseum, I found a rich villa that had been transformed into a castle. This could only be the home of a rich Roman citizen, and I decided to take a detour and make a statement to Rome. I barged in like your wife's mother-in-law, ready to wreak havoc. I spawned my men in, and we charged. It was a tough fight, as men were armed to the teeth, but I slowly pushed my way closer and closer to the entrance. As I entered, I saw a portal in the center of the room. Cautiously, I jumped to the stairs and made my way up. A rather large man stood there, in centurion armor. The battle began, but it ended nearly just as quick. This man was no match for me. I destroyed him, and with adrenaline high, I knew the Colosseum was next. On my way out, I realized there were invisible blocks above the portal that I'd been so cautious around. Oh well. I then stole his chair, as I figured he wouldn't need it anymore, and I put it by my bed. And then I realized I could enchant up to level 40 if I added more bookshelves. So I enchanted my sword and my bow, and I got level 5 and 7 enchants on them. I then went around upgrading my buildings before going back out to find the Colosseum. And then I continued my quest. Then found the Colosseum, and I made my way to the entry gates. The rules of the Colosseum are simple. Leave your armor behind, survive and make it to the chest in the middle, take the loot, and battle whatever is released. As the gates opened, I made my way quickly, and I saw the tigers inside. I grabbed the loot as fast as I could and began battling the tigers. After the tigers fell, I ran to Caesar and said, "Is this all you got, you pitiful..." There he was. The gladiator. Undefeated. Ruthless. The Battle of Rome was about to commence. To my blade, I ran back to Caesar, daring him to challenge me himself. And then I heard the clang of gates open, and as I looked beside me, I saw legionnaires pour in, headed up by a centurion. At first I didn't know if they were coming to congratulate me or to kill me, but it soon became evident they had no trophy in hand, just spears. As they came closer, they attacked and I began to run. My only chance now is to make it back to my gear and close the gates. And I arrived back in the tunnel and closed the gates and grabbed everything. However, the centurion and one legionnaire got in, and I had to battle them. But thankfully I had my stuff now, and I was able to take them both out. The people had seen what I had just done, and soon, Rome would be mine. Before I challenged the ancient god Orcus himself, the god of ancient Rome, I wanted to work on my base a little bit. I arrived home, and the work began. First I began by enchanting my shovel. I then began terraforming the dirt around my base. I used dark oak fences to create a pen for some animals. I dug out a sporadic pathway. I was going to use different stone elements to texture some sort of road. This would enable my troops to move quicker throughout my base. I moved my farm over, but I kept the same design. I then convinced some cows to make it into the pen, where they'd be kept forever, well, a while until I, relieve them of their lives. I also convinced some piggies to come. I finished the road, linking it all over the base, and began setting up patrols of men and guards to walk up and down, and guard key points. I then began the construction of a tall tower. I used dark oak again, and some ladders to access it. I placed some archers inside. If anyone approached with a force, they would be hailed upon by arrows. I then decided to go investigate the nearby castle that had been next to my base the entire time. As I punched my way through the wall, I could hear the undead. I began killing anything that stood in my path, destroying spawners, and taking all the loot from the chests. This castle was huge, and I decided to abandon it for now and take the loot I'd gotten. I created more soldiers, then placed down a warehouse. This would enable my citizens to store higher resources and a lot more in capacity. I then began the search for one more large villa to assault using siege weapons. I tried using a trebuchet, but the boulders kept flinging right in front of me, so I decided to use a battering ram instead. I placed down my army, and we charged. I got on the battering ram, and we took down the gates. One by one, the gates fell, and as we charged through the city, countless guards came to meet us head-on. The battle raged as I moved through the buildings. This castle was essential, for hidden inside was the ancient armor of the gods, the only armor I could wear if I wanted to fight Orcus. Eventually, after making our way through the enemy, and after searching, I found it. The hidden room containing the armor of the gods. I claimed it and headed back home. After enchanting this set, I plunged into the underworld, and, after some searching, eventually, I found him, the god Orcus. The battle began. I placed down my soldiers as fast as he could kill them. Then, I ran out of men, and I began attacking myself. The battle was furious, men and demons dropping dead alike. Eventually, I was the last man standing. The battle continued to rage as I swung for my life, eating all the apples I could. And then, it happened. Orcus fell. I defeated the god of the underworld. I barely saved my life. When I made it home, I watched the sunrise for day 101. As I looked off, Rome is next, I thought. Nothing, I mean nothing, can stop us now.